Thank you for coming. Well, all right, welcome everybody. I'm Jason B. Kendrick, the Hardcore Communication Transformation Specialist, and this is Man Speak for Women. And this is Kirk M. Samuels. I'll let you introduce yourself, sir, because I know you do a better job than I will.
You think so?
I think you
I
might.
know me better than you.
I think you do.
Which camera do I look at, man? We got two cameras.
Look at that
Should
one.
I look at that
Yeah,
one?
look at
Okay,
that
because
one.
that one is actually broadcast on that one or something.
Yeah.
Right on. I am Kirk M. Samuels. I am the intimacy incubator. With strength, wisdom, gentleness, and mercy, I co create a world of intimacy and unconditional connection by teaching and inspiring 1 million men how to live free from internet pornography. That is my personal mission statement, my man.
Now
See,
I need to get my own
you
mission
got to get that
statement.
mission statement down, man.
See what happens when you're not prepared? You get overshadowed just like that.
No way, man. No way, man.
So
I'll be Tonto, you be Lone Ranger.
I'm still not sure what Tonto means.
Me neither.
So tonight's mission, what our purpose is tonight, is we want to open the dialogue, and we as men want to explain our mindset, how we communicate, and some of the things that we deal with that you ladies may or may not be aware of. Um, a lot of the work that I have been doing has really been centered around heart-centered communication and filling that gap between men and women because we need each other. I know myself as a man, the women in my life I've had a hard time communicating with, or I felt like I've had a hard time connecting with, and it wasn't their fault. I was uneducated and I was missing a lot of things, and I know a lot of that. And we've had this discussion too about nice guy syndrome, which a brief breakdown of nice guy syndrome is over the last 200 something years since the Industrial Revolution, men have been leaving the homes, which has been leaving sons to be raised by single mothers or mothers in the school system, and we've kind of lost that tribal or village mentality where there's cousins and uncles and things that were good examples for a little boy. So we have been taught to look to the feminine for our validation, which has taken a lot of our own divine masculine away from us, where we've kind of given it away. And a lot of that has led to higher divorce rates. It has also led to what I affectionately call superwoman syndrome. A lot of ladies now feel they have to be everything for everyone. They have to be the father and the mother, the provider and the nurturer. And there's a lot of tired women out there, and that's one of the reasons this work is so vital and key right now. We need each other, and I know one of the new books I'm reading now, the new Manhood, was really talking about how women are probably 30 to 40 years ahead of us in evolution, mainly because it has been okay for them to be emotional. It has been okay for them to have intimate friendships and support. But we have been taught as men for, it seems like ever, that you don't need anybody, you better know it all, you better not ask for help, and you better not show weakness. And so most men, they can know each other for 20 years and never know an intimate detail about them. I know what you like for sports, I know what your hobbies are. I might not know what you like to drink or whatnot, but there's no real connection, there's no intimacy, there's no actual I'm in pain and I'm hurting, let's talk about it. And so the ladies have us beat hands down that way. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have these dialogues so that we can bridge the gap and learn that men and women communicate differently. And if we had some tools and some awareness around how we communicate differently, then maybe we can come together and learn and support each other. And so one of the reasons I want to bring Kirk in, not only because he's so handsome and cool, I mean he makes me look better just sitting next to him, but his work is directly related to nice guy syndrome and a lot of the struggles that men have been going through. So I'm gonna throw it over to you, sir, to talk a little bit about that, and then we'll just let this flow and see where it goes.
Yeah, you brought the word intimacy, and intimacy does not and cannot exist on the surface. It's not a surface kind of thing, it's a depth concept. And when we live, especially as men, when we live just on a surface plane, on a surface realm, just in that dimension, even if it's a two-dimensional realm, the third dimension that's missing is depth. And so, and unfortunately, even as a culture, as a society, we are living in a two-dimensional plane, a two-dimensional realm. Most of us live on screens, all day, every day, and and some of the passion, the calling, the purpose that I have is to work with guys that are absorbed and completely consumed with consuming from a screen. And so we get conditioned to not have depth. We get conditioned by that to not have anything beneath the surface, let alone intimacy and true type of intimacy. And we were actually talking about this before we even got started here, just in the notion of intimacy, not in a guy sense, but in a holistic sense, a mind, body, and spirit sense. Right. And so, as guys, yeah, we tend to just, we'll share the surface, we'll share the things that are quantifiable, we'll share the things that show up in stats, that show up on a resume, that show up, on an ID badge or something like that. But we don't generally tend to, none of those involve any depth. I mean, and so we generally tend to live just kind of on that particular level, and we suffer as a result. We suffer because we do live life isolated, and we are made and wired for connection and for relationship as human beings. Yeah. As human beings, in a prison, the way they punish prisoners is to put them in isolation, and so as human beings, we're wired for that. But when we live without any kind of intimacy in our life, and intimacy is not a purely sexual concept. No. Matter of fact, it's probably sexual last. Um, but when we live without that, then we live without the substance that makes us a human being, that makes us who we're created to be. We're better, mind, body, and spirit, when we are in connection, when we are in relationship. And when we live without that, man, we suffer.
Well, and you said it before. We were talking about when you open up yourself to actually have that connection of me too. I mean, the only difference between a stranger and a friend is the phrase "me too." And so when you can share what was the phrase you said? Sharing your brokenness.
Intimacy is shared brokenness.
Yeah. If you can share, and it's like, and that reminds me of there's that Japanese poem, the broken cup, where the Japanese fill in the cracks with the gold because they want to enhance the cracks, they want to enhance the defects, and that's really that enhancing what makes me unique is usually what I consider my defects. Mm-hmm. And if we can share that, we can share what we consider broken about us. Mm-hmm. And I know for men especially, there's a lot of us, and I had this conversation with a friend of mine recently, and we've been having this kind of debate back and forth because she's very frustrated. Mm-hmm. She's frustrated. She wants to find a man, pardon my French, but who has his shit together. Mm-hmm. And that emphasizes how far behind we as men are evolutionarily, because women have their shit together. They're buying houses, they've got the jobs, they're raising families, and they're looking for men to be able to do the same and then show up with an intimacy that we're not trained to have. Yeah. And one of the reasons I thought it was amazing to have you here with your specialty, because that frustration, we men feel it. And not only do we already feel emasculated, we already feel like less than men because we're not even sure what it means to be a man anymore. Then we have these powerful super women, and we're trying to court them. Yeah. We're trying to show off to them, and then build ourselves up, even though we're not even sure who we are as men or how we can be that version of a man to attract that woman. And so we're frustrated, and we still need an outlet. We still need a release. We still need to have our own version of intimacy, whether it's for a lot of us by ourselves on the computer, or going out and trying to meet somebody at a bar or something. But there's a lot of the masculine frustration really mirrors kind of the female frustration in a lot of ways. And I mean, there's a reason that divorce rates are so high, and that 90% of divorces are instigated by women. Yeah, because we're not showing up, right. And whether we're aware of it or not, we know we're not showing up.
Yeah. Yeah, and 6 out of 10 of those divorces involve someone with a porn problem. Yeah. 6 out of 10 is a big number. I mean, if I told you there was a 60% chance you'd win the Powerball today, you better empty your bank account buying Powerball tickets. I mean, it's just kind of a thing. And so, and even working with guys specifically, that have a pornography background, I come at it from a Me Too perspective. I come in the door with, I lead with my story. 30 of the first 40 years of my life, man, I was hooked on porn completely, and a lot of that came from me medicating. I mean, pornography is a medication, and you don't medicate where there's no pain. And so I was medicating, deep levels of pain that I had in my life that was undealt with, that was, I did not confront it, so I couldn't correct it. And I thought that to show up in a relationship with a woman, I had to show up a certain way that now I'm learning is complete opposite of the way I'm supposed to show up in a relationship, man. And that is, it's bizarro world. Just to like, wait a minute, everything that I thought was the way it was is not the way it is at all. I mean, I don't think that that we're called to show up in just pure brute strength and dominance and those sorts of things. I think women see vulnerability and seeing transparency and even seeing our ability to communicate our wounds and our brokenness as a strength.
Right.
But we as guys, from a warrior perspective, I can't come into this setting showing you my weakness, because then if I'm a warrior, if I'm a fighter, now you have my weakness to take advantage of. But it's not that way in a relationship, specifically with women today. And I mean, I believe you're absolutely right in terms of that level of frustration.
Yeah. Well, and even part of that frustration that I see, and there's even, women aren't innocent, even though they're far more advanced than we are as far as evolutionarily. But there's there's that same conditioning that this is what a man is, and a man it does not show weakness. And so I've seen a lot of, and we were talking about Brene Brown before. I mean, I love her work, and men, women, and worthiness. She tells a story of a man who came to one of her events with his wife and daughters. And so his wife and daughters are getting books signed and whatnot. And then as they were leaving, as the women were leaving, he stood there. And of course, she's like, "Come on, honey." He's like, "No." Like, "Come on, honey." Like she didn't want him to start a scene or something. And finally, he got to the table and asked her. He said, "Well, why don't you work with men?" And at the time, she didn't, because she just mainly worked with women because that was her specialty or her focus. And she said, "Well, I just don't work with men." He's like, "Well, that's convenient."
Mm-hmm.
And then he explained to her that his family, his wife and daughters, would rather see him die atop his white horse than see him be vulnerable.
Mm.
And for a lot of us as men, not being comfortable with vulnerability, not understanding what really being vulnerable is, what really sharing our soul is, and what that looks like, and not having practice with it, when we dare to go there,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't go the way we think it should go,
Yeah.
or we don't get the reaction we think we're going to get, we don't get that openness or that loving reaction, that almost puts us in a tailspin.
Mm-hmm.
And sends us backwards,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like, okay, well, I finally opened up to you. I finally bared my soul to you and told you what pains I have, what scars I have, what wounds I have, and what bothers me on a daily basis, what my frustrations are.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of having a loving response, there was that reaction. And a lot of times it's just the initial reaction, but we are so sensitive to it. It could just be that, whoa,
Yeah.
I didn't realize you were dealing with that much.
Yeah.
But we see that back,
Yeah.
and that's enough. And then it sends us in a spiral of isolation and self-deprecation, and then a lot of times right back to the computer.
Yeah.
Right back to that soothing.
Yeah, I think two things. First of all, I mean, as we're talking about, men are not comfortable with our intimacy, or with the notion of intimacy, and so as a result, women aren't comfortable today with male intimacy. So a lot of women can be scared off when a guy shows up with his poop in a group. When he shows up, with all of himself, it's like, whoa, where did this come from? I don't know if I can handle this. And so, there's on one level, it might be difficult for a woman to receive a man that that shows up in that kind of way. And on the other end of that, on the other end of your comment, excuse me, um, um, when a guy shows up and when he offers his intimacy with an outcome-driven perspective, when he's expecting something in return, then he's not coming up. It's not truly authentic, because it's a transaction for him. In order to show up in all of who you are, this is just me, and I'm gonna be me, whether you like me necessarily or not. And I mean, that is when you show up truly authentic. But so the whole notion of, I did this and I got a response, and so that sent me back in my cave, that sent me back in, in a ball, in a puddle of mess, and that sort of stuff. We have to be emotionally strong enough to show up even in our brokenness, without expectation of anything in return, without expectation of any kind of specific response. You're probably not going to be cheered, yay, yay, yay. I mean, if I really kind of unleashed on my pain, most people would probably run in fear. Like, the stuff that I really deal with and struggle with, and the stuff I think about, and it's like, whoa. I mean, it can be a lot. But guess what? The woman in my life loves that, and I don't understand it, but she does, and so yeah.
Well, and
We
that
went
brings
this way.
yeah, that brings up another point because we have been, especially in the last 20 years, since the invention of the internet, smartphones, our attention span has dwindled. And so we have that just instant gratification mindset. And so, okay, I know I'm supposed to be vulnerable. I know I'm supposed to show you my vulnerabilities in my heart and my soul. So I expect an instantaneous result. But that doesn't work because you need to take the time to actually get to know them and them to get to know you and find that comfort and that safety, because what psychologists call the pump and dump is basically you show up, you dump all your stuff on them, and then for your own personal gratification, and then they feel like they've been dumped on. They feel like you just emptied the trash can over them. You feel better now. They've got all your stuff. It's not an equal exchange. It's not a conversation. It's just a let me unload on you. And I think that's what sometimes is what happens is we want this instant gratification because that's what we're used to, because we have these computers, we have these smartphones, we have, you know, Tinder and all these other things where we just keep swiping until somebody says yes.
Yeah.
And you don't take the time to actually get to know each other and have those conversations and take time to actually learn how each other communicate.
Yeah. Yeah, it's we want microwave, but it's really a crock pot.
Oh yeah.
And I had a stint, if you will, with the online dating world. I confess.
Me too.
And and I don't think I could go back to that now. But even in that mentality, it is an instant gratification culture of it's about quantity and not quality. Again, it's about surface, not depth. And so we want to be a mile wide and we end up being an inch deep as opposed to being an inch wide and a mile deep.
Now I know what you meant by that.
Boom, come on, man.
Yeah. I
got
laughed.
you.
I wasn't sure where you're going. Now I know what you meant. But my whole purpose, and of course, quoting from Course in Miracles, you teach best what you most need to understand. And for me, this is what I need to understand because I was the quantity versus quality person, from teenage to 30. I was just chasing one girl after the other, never really getting to know anybody, never really having an intimate connection, mainly because of my own insecurities. Being a second generation nice guy, my father gave me what he had, which was his own nice guy insecurities, his own traumas and things. And that's why I recently did a post about you are your own father. Whether your father's here or not, whether your parents are here or not, there comes a point where you have to realize you have the same traumas. They may outpicture differently, but because you're in the same lineage, your parents' traumas are your traumas. And a lot of us now, I know a lot of folks I hang out with now, we all have this mindset of healing those 7 generations of trauma, healing ourselves so that we can heal our family, so that we can heal those things. And there was no way I was going to be able to have an intimate relationship prior to actually learning what my own stuff is. In the men's group that I run, we spend most of the time accepting where we are. Right now, where I am right now is perfect. And if I can accept that where I am right now is perfect, then my past thereby should be perfect as well because it brought me here. So now I can actually look at what happened as a lesson, as a growth opportunity, as something to bring me here. And if I can say now is perfect, I'm perfect now, I can accept where I am. And then I can start saying, okay, these things that are my cracks, that are my breaks, that are my traumas, are what makes me unique, but it's also part of my purpose. It's also part of my calling.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how we connect. This is how we find intimacy. And I see a lot more people opening up nowadays, and I think there's a lot of us that are just becoming aware that we need to do that. We need to get off the wide and get more deep.
Mm-hmm.
Except there's still some working out to do,
Yeah.
because I think sometimes it can be that, let me dump all over you, but I'm being deep. We have to find that crock pot mentality that, like, okay, let's accept where we are and let's connect where we are. Now let's connect deeper the next time and the next time and get to where we start to connect more and more and more
Mm-hmm.
on those deeper levels, because it is, the Me Too, there was the Me Too movement, but I think we need to redefine the Me Too movement as what it was to Me Too, I have trauma. Me Too, I am broken. Me Too, this is how we connect.
Mm-hmm.
Because The only difference between a stranger and a friend is the phrase "me too."
Yeah.
We can share these things together.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I want to bring you in, especially for this, because there aren't, in my experience, of course, you probably know stats more than I would, but there aren't as many women struggling with porn addiction.
Mm-hmm.
It is mainly a men thing. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that we are disconnected. We don't know how to be connected, even with other men.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is our salve, you know. It's usually, in my experience, I mean, I was introduced to it at like 5, 6 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and that was my introduction into the sexual world. So that was my mindset. And then as I grew up, that was kind of how I went about it.
Mm-hmm.
That was my very shallow, quantity over quality, mentality, because I didn't know any better.
Mm-hmm.
And it became very entrenched in partying and hooking up. And if I couldn't hook up, then I'd go to the computer.
Mm-hmm.
And then came a time where I thought, okay, it's too much trouble to even try to hook up, so I'll just go drink and go to the computer.
Right.
And those things, two things became hand in hand. So then when I had that wake up moment, it's like, okay, I'm addicted to two things. I'm an addict of alcohol because that soothes me, and then this is how I feel better about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And giving up both of those, and it's interesting because giving up one, giving up alcohol for me really made it easy to give up porn.
Mm-hmm.
And when I do slip, it's usually, oh, I'm just gonna have a beer with friends, and then I'll find myself back on the computer.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's that same, you know, soothing and trying to make myself feel better, but realizing that it's still surface.
Yeah.
It's still instant gratification. We're not going out to find depth. And I think I don't go out to bars anymore because of those things. It's hard for me to even interact a lot of times with folks in normal restaurants or bars or those kind of situations because there is no depth.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm the weird one that wants to find out what's going on with you.
Yeah.
How's your psychology? How's your trauma? How's your family?
Right.
I don't watch sports anymore because it's and the purpose behind having you here and having these discussions and having the ladies come and ask their questions is so that we can bridge that gap.
Mm-hmm.
We as men communicate in our own way and it makes sense to us. Ladies communicate in their way and it makes sense to them. We would be would behoove us to learn how we each communicate from each side. For us men to learn how women communicate.
Mm-hmm.
Because in most interactions, men think women's communication is passive aggressive. Well, if you look at a woman's makeup being more emotional, more intuitive, more aware of what's going on, and more, they can read the subtle, aspects of life. For them, that makes total sense. They can tell a whole story in the look or in the little thing, and then it's a nice way of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But as we men, being more linear action, task oriented people communicate, it comes across as rude
Mm-hmm.
to most women because it's very direct. It's like harsh.
Yeah.
And understanding just that we just communicate differently.
Yeah.
So like you might have an example of like, okay, we're out of toilet paper.
Yeah.
And so if it was a guy, it's like, go get toilet paper. If it was a woman, she might say, we're out of toilet paper. And as a guy would go, okay, let me put that on the list. I'm watching the game, hon.
Mm-hmm.
But probably your thought process is get your ass up and go get toilet paper.
Mm-hmm.
Or something along those lines.
Yeah.
That's probably more my translation.
That's probably your translation. That's probably your translation.
But just having that awareness of we communicate differently.
Yeah.
Because if you can imagine a yin yang, we are both sides. We are this part of this whole,
Mm-hmm.
but we are both sides of it, and we have different strengths and different weaknesses, and it's that harmony when we come together. But we have lost all awareness of how we come together anymore.
Mm-hmm.
With men becoming more feminine, women becoming more masculine, feeling like they have to do everything, and then us floundering, not sure where to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You talked about um, being surface and being shallow, and I think it's easy to default to that because being shallow and being spread thin is safe.
Mm-hmm.
When I have quantity over quality, I don't have to. There's not a lot of danger in that. Because if this falls through, then oh well, I got all of this over here. I mean, so there's no skin in the game per se. There's nothing. There's a lot less to lose, and so it's a way to kind of mitigate your losses when you live life about quantity as opposed to quality. Um, the unfortunate part is all of the valuable resources are beneath the surface. The gold, the diamond, the oil, I mean, all of that, all the minerals on this earth are beneath the surface. Everything on the surface just kind of comes and goes with the weather and with the ups and downs and all of those things. And so when we live just on that plane, we do tend to just find things being very, very transient, not really permanent, not very sticky in our lives because we choose to take the safe route as opposed to the more um, the more intentional, the deeper route, if you will. And then yeah, then when we do try to take that into some level of communication, even the way we talk, and the way we talk between men and women today, um, I'm talking in the bounds of a relationship. Even our level of conversation can just be surface. Even our level of the way we relate and the way we connect in the context of a relationship can just be surface. And again, you know, okay, that's great because you never get in an argument, or maybe you get into fewer arguments or fewer disagreements, or maybe you have fewer challenges in the relationship. But but how do you grow if the roots don't go down at all beneath the surface? And so the way we talk and the way we communicate is just as important in terms of the quality versus just the quantity. Now, it's great if you can have quantity and quality.
Yes.
If you can be a mile wide and a mile deep, I mean that's just dope right there. I mean that's the ultimate win-win.
But that takes time.
That takes time. That ain't gonna happen right away.
Two individuals.
Absolutely. Two broken people, by the way. I mean, none of us are perfect, and so when we come into a relationship understanding that I'm broken and this other person is broken, and we got to understand that it's going to take time for us to bring. And the brokenness is not necessarily a curse. I mean, it can be a blessing, because that's where you find the gifts. I mean, you got to have the fractures. You got to have the cracks and crevices to bring out the brilliance of the diamond, even. And so, and so that's not even a bad thing to have those level of challenges. But we got to be willing to do that. We got to be willing to have that kind of intention to live like that.
Well, that's part of the conscious relating, the conscious communicating, the coming together is if you don't share where you're broken, if you don't share what my cracks are, how are you? That's how we fit together. That's how we find those people that we actually fit
Yeah.
together. Our puzzle pieces are our cracks.
It's like a jigsaw puzzle.
If we don't show that part of ourselves, then you stay shallow. You don't know if this person fits with you.
Mm-hmm.
And the most intimate, connected, healthy relationships are those people who have exposed those faults, have exposed those cracks, and shown and figured out how they fit together. Because I know in my experience, a lot of times in my past relationships, I was looking for a fixer-upper or somebody to fix me.
Mm-hmm.
Either I wanted to fix them so they would love me because I fixed them,
Mm-hmm.
or I wanted somebody to come and fix me.
Mm-hmm.
But that's that same old thought process that you need to be everything for me.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of coming into it as a conscious whole being with my own faults,
Mm-hmm.
my own flaws, finding out who you are as a conscious whole being
Mm-hmm.
with your own faults and flaws, and if they fit together. And the only way we find out they fit together is by taking time to go through those layers,
Yeah.
by digging down.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so foreign to us nowadays with microwave society and a million channels with instant movies, and you don't have to wait for anything. You don't have to leave your house to buy groceries anymore.
Right.
Like you could stay on your couch and have everything delivered to you.
Right.
So there's no impetus. There's no you know reason really for us to take the time.
Mm-hmm.
But in this society of instant gratification, there's no more important thing for us than taking the time.
Yeah.
I haven't been. Had this realization 5 years ago after my last relationship, and haven't been in one because it dawned on me I was the common denominator
Mm-hmm.
in all of these failed relationships.
Absolutely.
And so I need to do some work on me.
Mm-hmm.
And this, the Man Speak for Women, the men's group, all the other work is all outpicturing of that.
Right.
Because everything I was learning and everything I was gaining and meeting people like you and learning from you, these were all things that I feel so empowered to, or just that they're so necessary to be shared.
Yeah.
Because we don't get on here and share our dirty laundry publicly.
Yeah.
And say I'm a broken man looking to find my wholeness with somebody else.
Right.
The other broken men out there aren't going to know.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of ladies out there, and the reason I had Kirk come on the Man Speak for Women, this is for you ladies, is because I know a lot of you have dealt with this in your relationships. You may be in a relationship now and not sure what to do about this, how to communicate with your man. Because, ladies, I know you know, whether you want to admit it or not, whether you ever tell him or not, you know what he does when you're not around. You know what he's doing. You know how he soothes himself. And if it's porn or alcohol or whatever it is, there are ways to connect. There are ways to talk about it. But you have to open the door, and that starts with being willing to go deep. And that's why I brought you, because I know you have some tools or some insights into how to broach that subject. Because it's like any other touchy subject, especially for men nowadays. It's like we're already bruised, we're already broken, and now we want to dig in there. How do we do that? How does a woman talk to her man about this in a loving way that may actually be helpful?
You know, the target audience to my book is actually women. I didn't even start off with that intention. I just realized it when I probably got about halfway, three quarters through, that everything that I'm explaining is like duh to a guy. I mean, in terms of how we're wired and how we're driven and what really lights our fire and those kinds of things. And so I realized that my target audience was women, and I realized that I would love to reach a guy, and I work with guys. I don't work with women that struggle with pornography. I work with guys specifically. Because I know guys best. I've been a guy for 45, almost 46 years, so I got some notches on my belt. I got some experience in that kind of way, and then to be able to relate that and to translate that to a woman. I also know what it's like to be a husband that has a wife that has to deal with her husband's porn problem. And now being on this side of it, and to experience freedom. I mean, I'm passionate about what I do in working with guys, because I'm not anti-porn. I'm actually pro-freedom. I mean, I'm not the guy to come in telling somebody that you're wrong, you're bad, and you should just stop and that sort of stuff. I get that freedom is the best drug ever. I mean, in terms of, man, freedom is dope. I mean, freedom opens the door for everything. And so I come in like, man, I'm not here to tell anybody, how bad they are and how broken they are and that sort of stuff. I almost relate myself to almost a spirit of like Harriet Tubman. I've escaped from slavery. I made it across the Mason-Dixon line into the North. And then I realized that wasn't good enough. My freedom wasn't good enough. Now I go back into slave territory and I try to lead people out the way I got out into freedom, because freedom is awesome and freedom is something that this country is founded on. And so, in the context of a relationship, a woman knows when she doesn't have all of her man. Women know that. Women know inherently when there's a part of him that she doesn't have access to. And there's that creates a cycle and a level of wounds and hurts on her part, and at some point, in my opinion, it can become abuse. And I think that's why a lot of women are commonly diagnosed with PTSD when their husbands have porn problems, because it is repeated trauma over and over again. She sees it as infidelity. A lot of guys are like, well, I'm doing porn so I don't go cheat. Well, and the result to her is the exact same as if you would, in terms of how it translates to her heart and to her spirit. And it reinforces the message that our society tells her, which is that she's not enough. And she has to go to bed every night knowing that you're in another room with your mistress. And so even in my book, I personify pornography as a person, as a mistress. I call her the IP mistress, and all the things that she does that porn can't do. And by nature, I think the spirit of a woman towards her man is normally has some tint of, or a hint of, jealousy, in terms of, I want all of him. I don't know that there's a healthy woman that would settle for part of her man. That, to me, that's kind of I just don't see a healthy woman doing that. Well, guess what? Pornography doesn't want to settle for part of you either. Pornography wants all of you. It wants everything. It wants, I mean, all of your money. It wants your kids. It wants your family, your household. It wants you to pass it down generation to generation. It wants to tear apart your family. It wants to tear apart your wife. I mean, it wants absolute control in your home. No guy, a guy wants the whole notion of time and spending time and the time that it takes to dig deep and intimacy and that sort of stuff. A guy might kind of balk at that and say, man, I don't, where do I find time to connect with my wife and to all these other things. Well, dude, if you struggle with porn,
There's your time right there.
there's all of your time you need right there. I mean, you're spending copious amounts of time looking at a screen. And oh, by the way, to me, the weakest form that I've experienced in my masculinity was sitting in front of a screen, looking at and sexualizing an image.
A fake
I
image.
mean, a fake image. I mean, offering up my bodily sacrifices to an artificial God on a screen. And that having control of me, something artificial having control of me. And oh, by the way, I'm kind of on a little rant right now if you can't tell. But oh, by the way, today, porn is absolutely free to consume, and as much as you want. It's the only drug ever that has been free and unlimited in history. It's free to consume. It's going to cost you something on the back end, but that porn industry, that porn and sex industry makes more money than all professional sports combined. Why? Because we're being monetized. Guys sitting down at the screen is being completely monetized for someone else's benefit. To me, that is slavery.
Yeah.
That's the definition of slavery. And so, and then you're going to pay for it, but you're going to pay for it on the back end when you get a divorce. You're going to pay for it on the back end when 6 out of 10 divorces involved. And, when you have less time with your kids, when you have less money in your bank account, when you have less of you there, when you're not living in your home anymore, every guy that's out there that can relate knows exactly what I'm talking about. So the price comes on the back end. But in the meantime, your family, your household, your self-esteem, your self-worth, your self-value, all those things are just being taken from you for the sake of living in a completely surface, shallow existence of just consumption. And we haven't even gotten to the whole notion of objectification and violence in porn and that sort of stuff, and how it makes us see women, period.
It's a fantasy world of our own creation that's not real. And one of the things I'm listening and I'm going over, the top 3 needs for men and the top 3 needs for women. And this is one of the top things that every time I get a chance to do this, I bring up, because if we don't understand as men what women need, what their top 3 needs are, and women don't understand what our top 3 needs are, there's a lack of success. I mean, we're kind of playing behind the 8 ball. But I'm listening to how this fantasy, how the IP mistress takes out all 6 on both sides. So for you guys, a lady's top 3 needs. Now these are generalized. Everything I do is generalized, so I'm using a broad paintbrush. So this may not be specific to every woman, but at some level, it will resonate mostly. So I know I get a lot of comments that are like, that doesn't sound like me at all. Well, maybe you're the exception, but most people this will make sense to. So for ladies, top 3 needs are safety. That's physical safety. They want to know that they're protected. They want to know that they can count on you. Security. Sounds a lot like safety, but it's not. Security is more about, where's this relationship going? Can I trust you? Are we together? And presence. Presence, that actual be wholly here, present in the moment. If you want to talk about quality or quantity, your woman doesn't need 24 hours of your time in a day. She may only need 30 minutes of your time, but it's got to be quality. You need to be present, fully 100% present. If you're on the computer, you're not 100% there. If you're on the computer with your mistress, she doesn't feel safe. She definitely doesn't feel like there's any security in that relationship. And that's why 90% of divorces are instigated by women nowadays. Now, that's just the lady side. We men think we get off scot-free because I'm not hurting anybody because I'm on a computer. But as the top 3 needs for men, we need to have a sense of respect, a sense of control, and a purpose. Well, you don't respect yourself when you know you go home every night to this fake computer and this fake image. You don't feel like you have any kind of control when you can't stop yourself from getting on a computer because you're feeling down or you're feeling triggered or you're feeling whatnot. And you definitely don't feel like you're fulfilling your purpose when you're spending all of your time chasing a fantasy. You're not spending your time, and that's always in the back of your head. You're like, oh well, just this one time it's okay, or it's not no big deal. I'm not hurting anybody, but you are beating yourself up inside. You're just taking one more notch, one more piece out of your self-esteem because you know you can spend that time on your purpose, on something that really matters to you, something that really fills your soul. And so each of those needs is detrimented by being addicted to porn, by using porn, by being thinking that this isn't a problem. That's shallow, wide, quantity over quality sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's just, we think it's harmless because we've been raised with it. We think the screens are harmless because they're in everybody's homes. We think that these things, because we've all had it since we grew up, is harmless.
Mm-hmm.
But when you really look at it, when you stop to go deep, you see that it's pervasive and is cracking the foundation of all of our relationships, of our own self-esteem, of our own who we are.
Mm-hmm. Somebody actually asked, why do men choose porn over the real thing?
I'll leave that one to you, sir.
You leave that to me?
Yeah.
Well, you gonna make me the expert, huh?
You are
I
the
gotta be the
expert.
porn guy. Okay, fine. Oh, that's all right, man. I'll take one for the team.
I can throw it at it, but I know you'll be like,
I'll take one for the team.
let me do it the right way.
If he could just stop, he would. I actually one of the early titles of my book was going to be just stop in quotes. Um, and I tell you, and speaking to the guy, again, I don't enter. I don't talk to any guy or any male audience from a position of condemnation. I've been there, done that, and so I'm not even coming from that perspective. And so I feel the obligation, I feel the, if you will, just the the push to explain that most guys by far, I would say almost every guy that I've talked to that has struggled with a pornography problem, um, was introduced to porn sometime, definitely before excuse me, before the age of 12, probably sometime by the age of 8 or 9. Most guys will say 8 or 9 years old, which is first or second grade. And so, I mean, this is something that we as guys, again, a lot of us have grown up around. I mean, we've actually developed um, our sexuality and part of our identity around twisted sexuality, around the whole notion of something that is not intimate. And so we have grown up with this. It's grown literally within us. And they've done PET scans, they've done brain scans to show that guys that struggle with porn problems have actual holes in their brain. And so if you take any kid and you introduce something to him or her, in this case him, at that early of an age, our brain is not even fully developed until we're in our mid 20s. You still got another couple years. You got a long time to go, man. And so to grow up around that, it's very hard to picture your life without that. As a matter of fact, it's almost like I mean, the fight or flight mechanism kicks in so much that the guy can feel like, I can't survive, I can't live without that in my life because I've grown up around that level, with some level of dependency in that since I was in early elementary school. So it's not just as easy as to just say, a guy should just stop. And oh, by the way, this IP mistress, as I call her, she was in his life before his wife, before his current girlfriend, before his current relationship. If he has a faith background, she was probably in his life before God was. And so he has based everything he's known about relationship and connection and humanity and especially sexuality around something that was twisted, something that was a little bit off or even a lot off, something that set him in the wrong direction. And if you start off at the age of 8, and if you were to invest $1 a day, a quarter a day, how much would you have by the time you got to be 30, 40, 50 years old? A lot. Compounding interest. And so that pornography that started off in his life, in his spirit when he was 8 years old, has compounded, so much interest that, I mean, it's become just this huge amount in his bank account. And it's very difficult for him to see a different way. And then you add in the shame and that sort of stuff. And it's very hard to replace even something real with something artificial when something artificial is very real to you in your life. And pornography has been a very real thing, especially if there's any maybe abuse or any kind of a wound or any kind of a question, whether it's abandonment or, women would be surprised how many men struggle with some level of sexual abuse in their young age and that sort of thing. And so, I mean, if that met any kind of an early need in his life, even if he has a very real thing next to him, even if he has a very real woman in his life, it's not just that easy that he can just turn and kind of walk away from that whole thing, because again, it is very real, even though it is very artificial.
Well, I mean, I can only speak from my experience, but I have been in relationships where when I got stressed out, when we were having issues, when there was bills to pay or there was something going on and there was tension, I was more, I would wake up early
Mm-hmm.
while everybody's still sleeping and go to the computer because
Absolutely.
I had to soothe myself, or
Mm-hmm.
I wanted wanted to feel like I had some sort of control, or like I had this little secret thing that made me feel like, okay, you know, I feel a little better now, and I got that dopamine, hit or something, and and there was no way to explain it.
Yeah.
Because consciously, logically, it doesn't make any sense at all.
Right.
I have this beautiful woman in the bedroom,
Absolutely.
but I'm going to go sneak over here. It makes no sense at all. But it's just like any addict or any there's that chemical just switch in the brain, and you're not even conscious. We spend 95% of our day unconscious running out programs anyway. Then you add something like that into it, and you wonder why. Well, yeah, it doesn't make any sense, but I'm still going to do it.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. And one of the things that is really difficult for men these days, and we're kind of boxed in, and it's taking a lot of bravery and a lot of courage and a lot of patience from our women and understanding, because not only do we have the old paradigm of masculinity, which is you have to be stoic, you have to be a know-it-all, you never ask for support, and you don't show weakness. And so for us to heal our brokenness, we have to be vulnerable. So that goes against everything we've been taught. And then you add in things like pornography, or you add in things like our own abuse and how we soothe, and that just adds to the shame.
Yeah.
So we're ashamed that because of the old paradigm we've been taught, none of us feel like men, because we know we don't fit that mold, because we have emotions, we have sensitivities.
Right.
And so now we're ashamed of who we are because we don't fit that mold. And then we're frustrated in a relationship because women have so far surpassed us that we don't feel like we can compete. But these are the people we need to ask for support. These are the ones that we want to have in our lives, and so we feel like we're confined to this box that just keeps tightening down and tightening down. And each time we venture out, or each time we chance to take that moment to be vulnerable, a lot of times I think we do it almost as a self-flagellation or self-sabotage, because we know we haven't spent the time with this person.
Right.
We know that this is not the right time, but then there's this compulsion and we do it, and then it turns back on us, and then it's just, okay, well, see, I told you I was broken and wrong and worthless.
Yeah.
And so it just shame feeds shame.
Yeah. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy is what it does. It becomes something that it's almost like spiritual cutting, I call it, because I mean, people that physically cut themselves, it's basically it's a physical manifestation of what's going on inside of them. I use this pain to replace this pain that I have. And so, what the cycle of pornography does, the cycle of consumption of pornography, it becomes a habit, it becomes a cycle where you begin to replace one kind of pain with something that can still cause another kind of pain in your life. And it does become a cycle. In my book, I talk about the 6 V's when I talk about the IP mistress: visualization, variety, vitality, victory, vacation, and validation. And through each one of those, through each one of those, he's either getting, a huge amount of dopamine. He's either getting a spike of testosterone, a spike of endorphins, and very significantly, he gets a spike of oxytocin. Oxytocin is the bonding chemical that connects us as human beings together. It's also the perfect antidote to cortisol, which is the stress hormone. And so, how many people live without stress? Probably not very many in America. So it becomes a great way to relieve that. So I say, what if cocaine or crack? By the way, a dopamine spike is the same thing that happens when you take drugs like cocaine or crack. It's also the same thing that happens when you take drugs like Adderall or Ritalin. So what if he has some level of ADHD and he can self-medicate that thing? That could be very powerful. What if he has low testosterone and he can boost his testosterone with pornography? That can be a very significant thing. I mean, endorphins are kind of the body's natural opiate, if you will. Artificial opiates are drugs like heroin, morphine, codeine, oxycontin, and those sorts of things. And so if I get an endorphin spike, I am literally medicating pain, from a pharmacy that I have inside. So if cocaine or crack were free and unlimited, we'd have a problem with it. If it, I mean, the low T industry is like a $4 or $5 billion a year industry in America. I mean, if heroin was free and unlimited, we'd have a significant problem with that. And we have problems with all of those. The Surgeon General is telling us to walk around with Narcan because so many people are ODing on opiates. I mean, and so we already have a problem with that. And oh, by the way, when I mix in something like an oxytocin, I'm just getting kind of on the chemical realm, on the pharmaceutical realm. When I mix in something like oxytocin, now I bond with that. Now, as a human being, I'm bonding with something, even though it's artificial. So I'm creating soul ties, if you will, or an emotional attachment with this thing. And then somebody is going to ask me to just stop. Somebody, and this is free, by the way. And oh, by the way, it's in everybody's pocket. I mean, it's in your pocket 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. No relationship is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And oh, by the way, porn never says no. Porn never has an attitude. Porn never says, I don't like the way you said that. Porn never says, ew, that's nasty, I ain't doing that. Porn says yes all the time. All the time, yes. That can be a very powerful thing, and it can easily get a guy off track. And I'm not an apologist for guys, by the way. I'm not making excuses because I know that freedom is better than even those six B's put together. Freedom, and then when you experience freedom in life and you're able to experience intimacy, game over, man. Now you say I got to go back and get somebody else because somebody else needs to experience this.
Well, and that brings up a great point because I know it sounds like maybe that I'm just saying, oh, poor us as men. You know, we're stuck in this box and we have all these issues and we're doing these things. And I don't say it that way. I'm saying it that way so that other men can actually acknowledge where they're at, so that you women know what we're dealing with, and so that we can be aware of it, so that we can say right here, right now, I understand that I'm broken, I've got jagged edges, and these are the things I'm dealing with. And I bring people like this in, you know, like my man here, to talk about these things so that we can say, guess what? It's not just me. It's not just you. And if we're all aware of this, if we open it up, you know, Brene Brown says that the only things that shame needs to grow is secrecy and isolation.
Mm-hmm.
But it does not survive out in the open.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just say it, so we just say we have a problem with porn. We just say we have a problem with intimacy. If we just say we as men right now are behind, we are learning as fast as we can. We know that we're behind, and we're asking for support. And that support doesn't look like, ladies, I know you already have 1,000 things on your plate. You're super women. You've got to do everything for everybody. This is not about you doing one more thing. It's about awareness and acknowledgement. Because the frustration comes from us trying to do work, us trying to heal ourselves and bring this to the forefront, but there's no understanding because you don't know what we're up to. We haven't been open and honest to you. We're not saying this is what I'm up to. We're just secretly trying to fix ourselves in a closet, which doesn't work.
No.
Doesn't work. And so now we are bringing this out to you so you're aware of what we're doing, so that you can even hold us accountable. You know, you can be aware that we are dealing with this. We're dealing with nice guy syndrome. I know you're dealing with superwoman syndrome. I know that we're not communicating. We're not being intimate. We're not even understanding how to be communicative in an intimate relationship. And it's not until we acknowledge where we're lacking that we can take strides to get there. So
yeah,
we're not saying that we men have it all bad and that you ladies have to fix us. I want to bring awareness to this. I want to bring awareness so that we can learn to communicate, because we need each other. We've tried, you know, before the patriarchy, there was a matriarchy. We tried to have nothing but women run it. Now we try to have nothing but men run it. We need to come together. Mm-hmm. And that starts now by acknowledging where we're both at.
Yeah.
And so acknowledging what's going on and saying, okay, this is where we're at. No harm, no foul, not good or bad. This is where we are. We have to acknowledge where we are and move forward in awareness and with our eyes open.
Yeah. And the reason we have the level of objectification that we do in our culture in terms of female objectification is because our population of men have been conditioned to see women as objects.
Yeah.
That's just a reality. That's just kind of the way it is. And the reason there is a Me Too movement, and the reason there is all of those things, and the reason you women are feeling like a commodity, is because we are trained from a very young age to consume you. And by default, by nature, you can't love anything that you consume. You don't love anything that you consume. So it's very hard for us to love you. And obviously, if we can't love you, then it's very hard to be intimate with you. So as you live in this world of relationship, whether you're in a dating world, whether you're married, whether you're divorced, whatever it is, you know, your experience, you're not alone as well. Everyone feels like they're on an island. Every guy that struggles with porn feels like he's the only one that struggles that bad. And every woman with a man that struggles with porn feels like she's the only one with a man that struggles that bad. And so because we all feel like we're alone, it becomes an abusive relationship. I call pornography an abusive relationship. It abuses everybody in the house. And people don't want to talk, but we're afraid to talk about it. We talk about everything else in our culture. But if you go to a restaurant and say the word pornography out loud, I guarantee you, because I do it sometimes just for fun, I guarantee you people all around you will turn and look and what? That's like the kind of one of the last taboo things we talk about. And when I try to challenge guys in terms of, does that really make you feel like the man you want to be? And it's either, kind of one response or the other. And either guys just kind of flare up and say, man, I love my porn and, don't take my porn and this and that. And I'm like, all right, cool, dude. I mean, if I'm not talking to you, then I'm not the guy for you. If you don't have a porn problem, or I get the response of me too, basically. I mean, of like guys that yeah, man. I mean, I struggle with it too. I don't know what to do about it, and it's very hard for even guys to come forward and talk about it. So to have these conversations is important, and that's why I'm like, man, I'm all about this because I mean, I think the beginning of the end for pornography tearing apart relationships is for us to normalize the word. We normalize alcoholism. We've normalized today the opioid crisis. We've normalized all that kind of stuff. How many kids today are living in a broken home because of pornography? I mean, think about that. And what are the effects of kids growing up in a broken home? How many generations are being affected by that?
Yeah.
And so I mean, when we look at all the different problems and all those kinds of things, we have a relational crisis. We have relational poverty in America. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the forms of poverty, and we have the inability to connect, the inability to relate because we don't talk about things, we don't confront things, and we don't seek the things that we're made to have, which is things like connection. We seek stuff. Stuff is temporary. Man, when you die, all of your stuff is going to somebody else, including your debt. Is going to somebody else.
I'm so glad we did this after Black Friday because it's a perfect time to realize your stuff doesn't matter.
Whenever I show up, it's Black Friday. Just saying. But I mean, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that, man, we got to understand what are the important things, man. What are the important things in life? Yeah. I mean, on your last day alive, are you going to be surrounded by your stuff, or do you want to be surrounded by people that you love?
And it's always about people. So we have to have these conversations. We need to have the uncomfortable conversations. And that's one of the things I'm finding more and more is almost a litmus test around if somebody is somebody you should date. If you're going out dating, if you're looking for a partner, can you have those conversations? There are communication styles, there are types, there's personality types that fit, and there's those that are, they don't. It's kind of like the sides of the magnet. Some the positive negative ends they'll attract, but the positive they repel. And you find somebody that you have that comfort with, that's somebody you can actually talk about those things with, somebody you can actually normalize the things that would have been no-nos in your past relationship. That's where you head. Those are the people you want to start talking to, and those are the people you want to start bringing things up with to get deeper. And if you can do it with one person, you can do it with more.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of knowing that no matter what somebody says or does, it has nothing to do with you. It's all about them.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things, especially for you guys out there. All of this frustration that we're dealing with, all of this denied status syndrome stuff, everything that you hear from other people, it's not about you. And you're not on an island. You're not alone. And finding those guys that you can connect with and say me to, find those guys you can talk to, that's how we heal. The last time we did this, I had a revelation because growing up the way we have, we've been taught that you need to find that one mate for life, and that mate needs to be everything for you. And we wonder why we're so stressed out, and we end up feeding off each other, and then fighting. It starts off all lovey-dovey, and then within a few months or a year, then you're basically feeding off each other and fighting all the time in a relationship because we've been given this erroneous judgment that now we're together, you need to be everything for me, and I'm supposed to be everything for you. And that's not how it goes. And so one of the things I've seen in the past is that there's been this tendency that once you get together, that's it. You block out the rest of your friends, and then this person is your whole world, and then that starts that feeding process where you start feeding off each other. But when it comes to trauma, when it comes to deep healing, if we're in a relationship, male, female, or whatever, your partner is great for triage. They're great for emergencies. If you come home from work and you've had some trauma, they're great to get you started. Great to get you, calm down, go find you help. But if as a man, we need men to do deep dive healing. Women need women to do deep dive healing. So if you come to your partner expecting them to heal you and do that deep dive healing with you, they can be supportive, but don't expect them to be the one that gets that healing for you. Because if you're in a masculine feminine partnership, you don't have the tools. I cannot heal my woman. I can support her. I can be there for her. I can, help to calm her down and then support her in getting that support and help. But I'm not going to be able to heal her, and she's not going to be able to heal me. And that's one of those erroneous things that we need to bring up and realize that, yes, we need to have these conversations and talk about what our traumas are.
Yeah.
We need to be able to have those conversations and say, yes, I have these traumas, and guess what? I'm letting you know because I'm going to go heal it.
You know, I believe it takes a man to make a man.
Yeah.
And I believe that masculinity is grown kind of in a incubator, of masculinity best kind of thing. And and that being said, intimacy is a muscle, and intimacy is something that needs to be worked in order to get stronger. When you're able as a man to experience intimacy, even amongst other guys, you know, that can be very powerful in the context of your relationship with a woman. When you have guys that can share, and women are just natural at this in terms of they share life experiences and that sort of stuff, and they just do that. That's what they do. Guys, man, Rambo is a farce. Even the Lone Ranger had Tonto. And so we want to live life individually, but we're not individualistic people. We're tribal people. And so to be able to live out relationship in the context of just man to man, guy to guy, and have some level of intimacy there, because there's some things that I can explain to you as a man that you get that my woman doesn't get just naturally, that I have to go way around to explain all the backstory and all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, dude, I get it. And so especially today with most men were not raised with a healthy man, a healthy father figure in their life. And so most men have a father wound. Well, it's easier for me to talk to you about my father wound and to more instantly and more quickly connect than it is, to connect with a woman or the woman in my life and that sort of thing. And so to be able to play that out in a multiplicity of relationships, it's just it's a force multiplier for your intimacy. It's group training, if you will, for your intimacy muscle.
Yeah. And so, ladies, as you're working with your man, as you're learning these things so that you can improve your relationship, so you can have those better communications, those more intimate relationships, know that you need to encourage your man. And I'm not even gonna say need. I'm not gonna put shoulds on you or needs on you. It would behoove you. It would be beneficial to encourage him to find a group of men, to find some men that he can, connect with, have those communications with, just like you have your girlfriends. Because that's one of the main things we have been lacking. One of the reasons, because we haven't had over, the last 100 years, 200 years, there's been this just diminishing and acceptance of the diminishing of the man in the household, in the family relationship, in that of being a part of family. I mean, we all have seen the old 50s cartoon of the men sitting in the waiting room smoking cigars and like, oh, look what I did, I made a kid, while the woman's having her kid. Nowadays it's getting better, so the men are actually joining in and being a part of it, but there's still this acceptance of, well, the man goes away and the woman does all the child rearing. And this is why men are lacking in good male role models. Just like you said, it takes a man to incubate a man, it takes a man to raise a man, but we don't have those role models. We don't know, and so we are looking to TV, to pornography, to movies, to popular culture to decide who we are, and then we put these different masks on and say this is who I am, and then each year we have that mask, each year we play that role, we hide ourselves more and more and more, and that's why it's so hard for us to be vulnerable and to come out, because it takes so much time. There's so many layers, and that's why if you find somebody you can communicate with, when you find somebody you want to take that time with, somebody that inspires you to dig deep with, once you actually take the time to dig deep with him or her, if you find somebody you can actually dig deep with and get down into who they are and actually see each other, see the broken pieces and everything else, that's where intimacy begins. That's where the love actually begins. That's where those long-term relationships start, because you have taking the time to get down deep past those layers. And I have done. A friend of mine, Kevin Brown, does this tantric breath work, and I called upon him to work on some of my father wounds.
Mm-hmm.
And we spent an hour and a half one night, and it was this. And you've heard that we're onions. Everybody's an onion. We're layered. I got to experience the layers firsthand because he would talk to me and trigger me, and I would just cry and emote for however long I needed to, and then I would get to this nice, peaceful layer where it was like, oh, I can breathe now, and everything's wonderful. And then I hit the next layer. And this went on for an hour and a half, 10, 12, 15 layers. And that was just me doing work with myself. And so know that it's going to be work, but it's so worth it. And you can attest to this.
Yeah. It's worth it, man. I mean, all of that grind, all of that effort, everything that it takes to get to the freest, highest evolution of who you are, it's absolutely worth it. I mean, the land is ripe with milk and honey. I mean, like I say, freedom is dope, man. And so, when you can do the work and when you can grow and develop all of those parts of who you are, man, it just makes you look at yourself in a mirror totally different. And then when you can put that in the context of a relationship or relationships where you can be that and you can be that without shame, without guilt, when you can live life without shame, without guilt in terms of that thing hanging over your head, that's just a powerful, 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 powerful thing to be able to express in your in your manhood. And when you can even look at your wounds totally different, when you can look at your hurts and your abuses. Yeah, I one of these days I'm gonna flush this out, maybe in a book, I don't know, but I think wounded guy. I mean, first of all, if it takes a man to make a man, and most of us were raised by an unhealthy man, then it's easy to see how we have a generation or multiple generations of unhealthy men. Yeah. And I can get to the point where I am a husband, I am a father, I'm a man, and I don't know what a husband, a father, a man, are. I don't know what any one of them is. And so, we can be kind of living a life that we have no idea what it's supposed to be. Yeah. But in terms of those wounds, man, it's a father that was absent from the home, a father that was absent in the home, a father that was abusive, or a father that set a bar so high that the son can't reach it. And either way, those develop into wounds that we end up trying to medicate and trying to overcome and trying to compensate for. And then when you can find something that especially connects with a man's sexuality is like the nuclear reactor on a ship. I mean, it can be even if it's a small part of his life, it can power the entire ship, man. If you can tap into the trust level or the intimacy level of a man's sexuality, even in his woundedness, even in his brokenness, I mean, you got him. I mean, you absolutely got him. I'm not talking about just go have great sex. I'm having great sex and sexuality are totally different things. But to be able to lock into that from a man's perspective, man, when we get in touch and when we get control over our sexuality in terms of we don't feel like it's taken, we don't feel like it's just persistently and consistently wounded and that sort of stuff, man, it brings us to a very powerful place to truly be masculine, to walk into a room as a man and to be a thermostat, not a thermometer. I walk into the room. I don't need to dominate the room. I don't need to control the room. I don't need to, dominate a conversation. Excuse me. I don't need to dominate an interaction. I don't need to, I don't need anybody to fear me or to intimidate or anything like that. I can walk in there and I can just hold space.
That's where that quiet power comes.
Because I'm just secure.
Yeah.
I'm just secure in who I am.
Yeah.
And who I'm not.
And so if you want any more incentive on why you want to find men to do this work with, why ladies you want to find women to do this work with, the memory without the emotion is wisdom. And what we have now is a lot of memory and emotion. We have a lot of people avoiding memories because of the emotion. And you can't get past the emotion. You can't find the wisdom in a relationship. You can talk about it. You can talk about what you learned, but find your men with men. You come together and you dig deep and you talk about those memories. You talk about those painful memories and those experiences and you talk about it until it no longer affects you. It no longer has an emotional reaction. That becomes wisdom. And that's where you find that silent power. That's where you can walk in a room and not be triggered and not feel like you have to dominate the conversation, not feel like you have to show out how big you are, show off your Rolex or all these, start making it rain and popping bottles because I gotta show how big I am. You don't have to do that. Silent power comes from wisdom, and wisdom comes from doing the work, finding a way to get to those memories and releasing that emotion. Going back to your father and looking at what is that memory, what is that emotion, what is that wounding, and talking about it and experiencing it enough until the emotion is gone. That becomes the wisdom, and that's how you become the great man. That's how you become the great woman.
Wow.
So please.
Yeah. So there could be power in knowing, even, I mean, in terms of the wisdom, part of the serenity prayer is the wisdom to know the difference between what I can control and what I can't control. And so maybe part of that wisdom is not only in who I am or what I am, but also what I'm not.
Yes.
And I think, even back to the male female dynamic, I think it is beautiful when the two can exist in knowing who I am and who I'm not. And the freedom to not be what I'm not. And the freedom to allow somebody else to be who they are and me not feeling like I need to be that. To the freedom for a woman to not have to carry the burden, to not have to plan everything and make everything happen. The freedom to just be. And the freedom of a man to just kind of not have to be the woman.
Yes.
I don't always have to be the sensitive or the emotional. I can listen to the intuitiveness that a woman can provide me. But the freedom to do that, I think could be powerful just in the dynamic of a male and female relating to each other. Because I do sense a level of frustration, amongst women of having to do everything.
Yes.
I gotta do. Look around in every room. It's like, man, I gotta do everything in this joint.
Yeah.
I gotta clean it. I gotta pay for it. I gotta make it look pretty. I gotta kill the pig and come home and bring home the bacon, and then I gotta cook it up in 20 different ways like the lady on TV, and then I gotta go home at night and I gotta lay in the bed and I gotta be a porn star because this guy expects me to be able to do what the woman on TV does. On the computer screen, and I got to do everything, and I got to do everything right. I got to do everything perfect. That's got to be draining.
Well, it's frustrating for men as well.
Absolutely.
We know we're missing the mark. We know we have a role to play that we're not playing. We know we have a purpose that we're not meeting.
Right.
As in the yin and yang, we fit together, and we both have our sides, we both have our strengths, we have our purposes, and we've completely lost it. We're like, we're backwards now, and we're trying to fulfill the other role. We're not fulfilling our natural roles. And the only way we're going to find our way back is to have communications, to have community, is to come together and talk about these things until it's no longer an issue, until it's no longer a painful memory, and we can find some wisdom together. Because, poor women, you're tired. I see you every day exhausted, and we men want to help you, and we have no idea what we're doing.
And we want to, but we don't know how.
We have no idea what we're doing, and we tend to make it worse. At least that's been my experience. I'm like, I'm going to help you. I'm going to do everything, and then it doesn't turn out that well because we're not coming from a grounded, natural space. And so doing the work and being who you are and being with somebody who is who she is, and you can come together and then and find out what love needs in that moment. It's one of the things I've realized is that we've gone to the extremes. The men are more feminized, women are more masculine, and we've gone to these extremes so we can find our balance. We can come back. And as we find that balance, we find that flow, we realize each moment is different. There's going to be times you still need to be feminine. There's going to be times we still need I need to be hyper masculine. There's going to be times where the woman needs to be completely submissive or it can be completely controlling. But it's what's needed in the moment. And that is where the masters are the masters because they know what's needed in the moment and they do it.
It's like an ebb and flow.
Yes.
It's like a constant, sunrise, sunset. It's like a constant give and take. It's like the wind is kind of always blowing and swirling, and it is the give and take. And you got to think when those two things work in balance, those two things work in harmony, man, that's powerful, man. That's the stuff that dreams are made of, and we want that as people. I think today we are suffering from a lack of connection, a lack of who I am and me being who I am and those sorts of things, and I think we are suffering. We live in social media a lot, and I think we are just as a people missing that level of connection. You know, I know a lot of people whose favorite holiday is Thanksgiving. You know, I mean, and Thanksgiving or Christmas or something like that, where people just come together.
Yeah.
But to be able to come together, especially come together in the context of relationship, and to be able to come together in the context of relationship, and to be able to do it well, and like you said, it's different every moment. That's something that I never actually thought about. That yeah, I mean, there are some ways that in a relationship, you know, I am more of, you know, what would, I don't want to say more feminine, but I am more of a lead in some ways that would traditionally be maybe a feminine lead and that sort of thing. So and I'm okay with that. I mean, I'm completely okay with that dynamic. But from moment to moment, from day to day, you know, whatever that thing changes, man, I mean, it's yeah, that yin and that yang, they fit perfectly together.
Well, and for us to find a way to get back to that, that's where your personal healing comes in. Because we don't have intimacy, because we don't know how to connect, we don't feel like ourselves. We don't feel like we're lost on some island in the sea of people. And finding who we are, doing the work to find out who we are, which is going to take help. You can't do this alone. That's where the brotherhood and the friendship come in. Look, Dina's
Wow.
talking.
Man,
That's a long.
that's a long one,
Give us
Dina.
He's gonna read it. I'm gonna talk.
You want me to read it?
Yeah.
I mean, you want me to read it out loud?
Yeah, read it out
I'll
loud.
try, man. I got a little bit of dyslexia. It says, I feel divorce has contributed to the energy reversal with both single parents having to fill both mom and dad roles. Besides communication, what other ways do you guys feel balance can be restored? See more.
There's more there.
Yeah, there's more there.
Um,
Man, that's a great point in terms of
question.
I'm divorced and man, you know, having my I'm that's like you know, I got my kids week on week off, and so you know, yeah, those weeks are totally different than the opposite weeks, and you do have that, and then you, by the way, you have a lot of, you know, moms on the other side that do the same thing, that you know, and I will never ever try to pretend that I could replace my kid's mom.
Oh no.
I mean, and I don't think a woman should ever pretend that she could be deserving of a Father's Day card in terms of replacing the father.
Yeah.
You might be able to handle all the different roles, but I mean, as a woman, you cannot replace the father. But at the same time, we do end up swapping between those roles and those dynamics because it's not there, because the balance is not there. Ideally, I think both parents can work together. Even if you're not married, you can still be good co-parents.
Yeah. Well, that's the main thing. A lot of the couples, especially going through divorce that I coach or talk with, it's a refocusing. And one of the things that, you know, you talk about finding a rebalance with divorce and things like that. One of the things we need to let go of is the old paradigm that this is how it's supposed to be. It's not that way anymore. Divorced parents are the norm. Kids in mixed families are the norm. And so it's about what do we do now? You know, if you're going through divorce, and I have several clients who are right now, my main suggestion and coaching is focus on the kids. What can you agree on? You want to both be great parents together. Focus on the kids. Don't get caught up in the arguments of, you know, you did this, you did that, you're wrong, whatever. That doesn't serve anybody. Focus on what you can focus on and get flexible, because I don't think it's going to get any better before it gets much worse. So we're learning to be more flexible in moment to moment, masculine, feminine, in parenting, and
I want to throw in that I think it's very important for men and women, especially in divorce or going through divorce, is to not lose your femininity or your masculinity. To not think that you need to sacrifice being a woman for the sake of being a mom, or not sacrifice being a man for the sake of being a father. In terms of, I'm just going to deny myself, you know, the that part of who I am because I have to be this role just for my kids. The more healthier you are in who you are, the more healthier and beneficial you can be for your kids. And so that's a very, I mean, that's something that I have learned in terms of, you know, it doesn't serve my kids for me to sacrifice just my, I don't want to say my life, but to sacrifice who I am in terms of my life, my needs, my all those kinds of things for the sake of, well, I just got to be a parent. If I can just be a parent, that's it. And I happen to, I tried to make such an environment that my wife is freed up. My ex-wife, I'm sorry. Ooh, that's lit. Ooh, man, man, my ex-wife, for her to be freed up to have a social life. I want her to have a social life. I would love for her to be dating and to be doing her thing and to be living life. I mean, because in my mind, she's going to be more whole and healthy for the kids. I mean, I want her to have a break. I want her to have some space and some time and all those kinds of things. And so I think it's very important to not deny who you are specifically. Excuse me, specifically in whatever your masculine or feminine being is, to not deny that for the sake of being a divorced parent. Kids, they aren't going to appreciate it anyway. They don't know what you're giving up, so it's one of those things that you owe it to yourself to put the oxygen mask on in order to land that airplane.
Yeah, you bring up two great points because your kids aren't going to appreciate one or the other, but they learn by example. So if you're sacrificing yourself, if you're not doing what, taking care of your needs first, then that's what they learn. That's what they feel like that's the way you're supposed to be. And two, if you're giving up your femininity or your masculinity, what we're doing and what has been going on, and one of the reasons we're also frustrated is because we've been doing that. We have been taking on these other roles because we think that's what we're supposed to do. But if we would come back and learn what your unique masculinity or femininity is, and you find somebody else that has that polar opposite, you find a natural flow. I have conversations with business owners, ladies who have been in the masculine world for so long, that have taken on that persona so long, that they have forgotten what it's like to be taken care of or to be supported by a man. There was a friend of mine at a seminar was talking about she had a sprained wrist or broken arm or something, and she was on a plane and couldn't get her carry-on into the overhead. And a man asked if he could support her and put it up there, and her first response was, "No, I got it." And then she realized that no, she didn't have it, so then she had to, you know, have this guy support her. And then she was worried about whether or not she owed him something, that there was some sort of give and take. But really, when we are in our masculine and we are supporting the feminine, that's all we need.
Dude, that's dope.
That's it. And that's why we've
right.
lost it. Like, there's a lot of ladies, and I've had this conversation. I've had these arguments because it's so ingrained that business is masculine. But ladies, if you are strong in your femininity and your individuality, and you can stand in that, you will naturally lead the men. We are naturally predisposed to support you and to provide for you. And if you can stand in your femininity, you will naturally get that.
Yeah.
What tends to happen is we've been conditioned to think that business is masculine. And so you come in and adopt this masculine persona, and then you end up masculine to masculine as competitive. It's headbutting. It's this competition. And then there's a lot of ladies that are getting sick because running masculine energy constantly like that is unhealthy. Just like for us, running feminine energy lowers our testosterone. It's unhealthy for us. And we're living these unhealthy, imbalanced lifestyles. And so coming back to who you are and finding out who that is, because for a lot of us, there's going to be a lot of digging out and uncovering to figure out even who we really are. And when you find a way or the time or even a group to have those discussions with, to realize you're not alone, you're not on an island, that you are more than you think you are, you have more than you think you have, and that by digging down and finding out who you really are, and then having a relationship with somebody who knows who you really are and you know who they really are, that's where the intimacy, the beauty comes from. That's where that harmony comes from, and that balance, and all the frustration washes away because you're being naturally who you're supposed to be, and they are being naturally who they're supposed to be, and then you find that harmony. Yeah. And I don't know any other way of doing the work.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think it is a beautiful flow, a beautiful ebb and flow when it can exist in that way. And yeah, I mean, there's extreme power in being the feminine woman that you are and allowing your man to be the masculine man that he is. And there's extreme power in being the masculine man that you are and allowing your woman to be the feminine power that she is. That's powerful. That's where you multiply. That's the whole notion of multiplication. That's quick addition. And I am more than who I am. I'm whole and complete, but I'm wholer and completer. I mean, within the bounds of that relationship, because I don't have to be something that I'm not. I can know my limits, and I don't have to be those things that I'm not created to be, that I'm not wired to be, and I can be healthy in being me, even when me is limited in some kind of a way.
Yeah, this feels like a great time to talk about the energetics of relationship because most of us have no idea what that means. So here I'm going to give you a little breakdown. when you come together as two whole beings, as single beings, one of the reasons that puppy love and the beginning of the relationship is great is because you're two separate beings and you're giving and you're adding your energy to that relationship. And so you're basically creating a third entity, which is the relationship. This third entity, which makes it feel like so much bigger and so much, it's that multiplication, that compound effect. But then you lose your individuality and you start relying on that third entity, that relationship. And then you bleed that dry. And then all that's left is you to bleed each other dry. And then you wonder where the conflict and the contention and the all the problems that come in relationships comes from. But if you were being yourself and coming into connection with somebody knowing that you're going to create a third entity, which is a relationship, and you both need to be aware of your own needs as a man, as a woman, or however your relationship pans out, knowing that you need to be individual and fill yourselves up so that you can feed that third entity, so you can have that overflowing cup. If you're not being who you are, if they're not being who they are, and then you're feeding off each other, that is where all the contention comes from in a lot of relationships. And so finding somebody you can communicate with, to number one, find out what the purpose of that relationship is. Because most of us get in a relationship just because she's got a nice butt or he's cute, and then wonder why it doesn't work. There's no communication. There's no purpose. Talk about what is the purpose of this? Why are we together? And it doesn't matter if it's just for tonight. That's a holy relationship. If you have a communication, if you talk about the purpose is we're going to have fun tonight and enjoy each other, that's a holy relationship. It doesn't have to be for life. Relationships are for a reason, a season, and a lifetime. And most of the lifetime ones are just family and friends. Intimate relationships, special relationships, usually don't last that long. And it's because relationships are about growth and learning. So if you're willing to come to somebody and say, I feel a connection with you, I think we can grow together and learn together, but we want to be conscious about it. That's how you create a growth mindset. That's how you create a relationship that's worth getting into. Because
and that's also why I'm passionate about helping guys that struggle with pornography to get free from pornography, because a relationship with pornography doesn't create anything. There's no third anything. There's nothing above and beyond that. It's so temporary and it just goes away like a vapor, which is why you have to go back to it and you have to go back to it and you have to go back to it. There is no creation. It's all consumption. It's all consuming. And not only do you consume it, but while you're consuming it, it consumes you. And so at the end of it, there's actually less of you. There's actually less of you than when you began, as opposed to something that is real, that is intimate, that is something tangible. Then something that you are not consuming, but that you are actually serving or pouring into or working to create. And the opposite of consumption is creation. And so and that's what comes out of a healthy, real relationship, is some level of creation. Back to your purpose, where we're in the process of creating something. Sometimes you create a kid, sometimes you create a organization or business, sometimes you just create intimacy, sometimes you create neighborhood, you create relationship, create connection. I mean there's all kinds of things that come out of the whole notion of creation. But when we live in an artificial intimacy kind of setting, then we can always expect to be unfulfilled and unsatisfied at the end. We can always expect to never really feel like you're living the way you're supposed to live, or the way you really want to live, or the way you really want to be.
And gentlemen, if you want another reason to find a way away from porn, or find a way to be more healthy, or to get back to who you are actually giving your energy. You're being sucked dry, and it's not a figurative. It's literally.
Literally.
I have friends who have been struggling with this, and they're in a relationship, and there is a very distinctive difference when they have been off, and they've been just doing, going to the gym, being healthy. Their energy and vitality and their virility is so much more palpable that their women feel it. And they know when they've slipped. They know when they've gone back. So if you need another reason to get free, another reason for your own health and sanity, it's because you are actually giving yourself away to this fake screen, this IP mistress that doesn't give anything but consumes you. And so if you need any more reason, you want to have a healthy relationship, you want to be more of a man, have better, you want to even build your testosterone, get off the computer and go work out. this is how you get back to being healthy. And I know what's interesting, talking about getting off the computer, getting away from screens. We are so inundated with screens nowadays, but we don't look to those who have given them to us. You know, you look to a lot of the people who have, Bill Gates or Elon Musk or any of these guys who are like titans of industry. They limit the time their kids are on. They don't have a computer in their room. They don't allow them more than an hour a day, and the computer's in the kitchen. Like they can only do work on it. If these are the people that are this far, that this far advanced, or the titans of industry, and this is how they treat screens, this is how they treat computers with their families, it's something to look at. Because we just we're so like, oh, nonchalant about it, it's no big deal. But we're giving our lives away to the screen.
Yeah, and every screen is meant to monetize eyeballs.
Yeah.
Every single screen, in some kind of a way, is meant to monetize the eyeballs that are looking at it. I mean, and it's just in any kind of way. And so, yeah, I mean, do you want to become, do you want to become a commodity? Do you want to become something that is just monetized? I mean, or do you want to actually create something that has value and has worth? I mean, and so, in terms of screen time, in terms of looking for a connection in that flat surface is gonna basically open the doorway, the gateway for some very wealthy people to monetize who you are. So we got to get into person. We got to get into roles, and we got to get into the same room, feeling the same temperature, breathing the same air, feeling skin. I mean, hugging. I mean, shaking hands, all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's where life and then you can create all of those, that pharmacology in your brain. You can create that in some very natural ways, some very beneficial ways.
Right, go out in nature, and I know I can ask you this question, but I probably already know the answer. Anytime I've been creative, anytime I've created anything, the TV's off, the computer's off. I'm either out in nature or I'm at a coffee shop. And maybe I'm on my computer writing, but that's the only screen I'm using. I am unplugged. And there's nature. You may be unplugged, but I bet you'll be more connected. What does that mean, or whatever? But
I get some of my best ideas while I'm running outdoors somewhere. I mean, I get some of my best kind of, oh man, that would be awesome if I did that and did that. And so, excuse me, to be able to get out and to experience the world and experience life. Maybe that's why time seems like it's going by so fast, because we're not out experiencing moments of the day. We're not out experiencing, the moments of life, the moments of connection, the moments of just reality. And then we look up and, can you believe it's past Thanksgiving already? I remember exactly what I was wearing on New Year's Eve this year, 2018. And all of a sudden now we're back to the end of the year. And maybe we're not experiencing, the depth of life because we're not out experiencing those things. When you're out in the sun, you're getting free vitamin D. I mean, it's raining vitamin D. And so to get out and experience life, man, just oxygen, man, just fresh air, and then again to be able to live life in relationship and in connection with people in healthy ways. I mean, it's just a more better.
Yeah. Now, I love movies. I'm a video file, film file, whatever you want to call it. I love movies, so I'm not saying that it's bad. I'm not judging anybody for doing it. I know in my life, the less screen time I have, the better my life is. The more connection I have with others, the more I experience in life. So to bring it back, and we're gonna wrap this up soon because we've been running our mouths for an hour and a half now. But to bring it back to why for man speak for women, and I wanted to touch on something because I've had a lot of feedback about the man speak for women. Um, it's hyphenated. It wasn't initially because I didn't catch it, but it's not about mansplaining or anything like that. It's really like man talk or how we communicate so that you ladies can understand. But I've decided not to change it because it gets such a reaction that at least you ladies are going to find out what the hell I mean. But to get it back, why we had this discussion tonight. We are all in this together. Ladies, you know somebody, you've dealt with somebody, probably most of your boyfriends have some sort of experience with pornography addiction or dealing with it or being, maybe they're addicted to video games. It's the same sort of thing. You get the same dopamine reaction to video games as you would pornography. And so being aware that this is going on is how we start to make changes and opening up the dialogue. So you're in a relationship, if you can have these conversations with them, have these conversations with them and get them outside in nature, get them out in the sun, get some vitamin D, and start talking again. Get away from the screens. And if you can't talk to them, that might be an indication that it's time to move on.
Yeah, I mean, to be able to, the ability to have it be a safe conversation. When I say safe conversation, I'm talking about just the ability to talk about, just the ability to bring it up, just the ability to say the word. And if it is, if it is such a visceral response to bring up the word or bring up the topic, then that tells you that there's an abusive relationship with an artificial intimacy within the context of your relationship, and it is something that needs to be addressed. And again, speaking, to women, by the way, I will never espouse that a woman should just kind of deal with it and just suck it up and just kind of stay with it. I mean, I'm not, I'm not telling you to go out and get a divorce from your man if he struggles with porn, or anything like that. But I'm not the guy also to tell women to just stick in there and stick with it and just, do the right thing. At some point, it becomes so detrimental that, like I said, I believe at some point it can become a form of abuse within the context of a relationship. If it's a significant problem for you, lady, and you are bringing it to him and he has no desire to address it as a problem between the two of you, huge red flag, and that's something that you might want to consider in terms of your life. If he's a good man and he struggles with it and he just doesn't know how and all that kind of stuff, and I mean, he has a heart for you and all those things. I mean, that's something totally different. And, here I am. I mean, tell him to get help from somebody. Tell him to go to counseling. Tell him to, whatever, call this guy. Tell him to call me. I mean, whatever it is to get help.
Call somebody.
Call somebody and do what you got to do. But lady out there, I would not expect any woman to stand in a relationship or stay in a relationship where it is detrimental to her being, to herself, and to who she is as a woman. Sometimes, you got to know when to hold them and when to fold them, and you got to know when to walk away when the dealing's done, kind of thing. But that being said, if he has a heart for, I mean, if it hurts him the same way, or at least in a way that it hurts you, and or he doesn't like the fact that he hurts you or that it hurts you, that's one category. That's guy that we can help.
Yeah.
Guy that we can't help is the guy that says, deal with it. So what? Or the guy that says, I need you to join in. The guy that puts pressure on his woman, on the lady in his life, his wife, his girlfriend, whatever, to say, you need to become part of this. I need you to either perform like this. I need you to watch this with me, even if you don't want to. I need you to do what she does on the screen. I need you to, let's start doing all this stuff that we're consuming, and it's detrimental to your relationship. If it's detrimental to your relationship to the point where it affects you deeply, then, by all means, ma'am, whoever you are, you got to do something. You got to do something about that. Get help for yourself.
And let's be real. I mean, we're all struggling with something, and if you're willing, if he's worth it, if she's worth it, if you're willing to have that conversation and work on it, this could be the seed that grows your relationship into the most intimate, powerful thing on the planet.
Oh yeah.
And it may not, and it may not. And I mean, let's get honest too. If you are really making love, if you have had that experience, and I've had a glimpse of it, and it's one of the seeds that was planted in my mind to get me moving in this direction, because real lovemaking, real intimacy doesn't look anything like what you see on the screen.
Mm-mm.
It looks nothing like that, and it is so much more visceral and vital, and just and heart opening and spiritual.
It's so powerful that, you know real love making, when you're done, you don't roll over.
No, no.
When you're done, you don't go to your own corners of the bed. When you're done, you don't just, get up and go make a sandwich.
Yeah. You don't clock out and say thank you.
No, it is not something that is a moment. It's something that brings connection. It's something that brings a deeper level of intimacy. It is something that I mean, even from a guy perspective, and ladies, if you haven't experienced this, trust me, it's out there to be experienced by some guys. Where after you have sex, first of all, when you're done having sex, you don't feel like he was just using you to masturbate.
Right.
And I mean, that's very important. But then after that, you don't feel like less than. You feel like he's more connected to you. You feel like he's more into you. I mean, now, depending on how old the guy is, that doesn't mean he can go right back at it, because sometimes there's the reboot period and all that kind of stuff. Let's just keep it real. Can we keep it real? We're grown-ups, right? but at the same time, you don't feel like afterwards that there is a need for him to disconnect. If there's a need for him to disconnect, it wasn't an intimate act for him. It was a physical act. You had a one dimension experience.
And there's a very rampant lack of actual sex or actual connection or actual orgasms in our country because of a lot of these issues. Many of us in this society have never had a real love-making experience. We've never had a real orgasmic experience. It's just a physical, you know, pleasure-seeking thing, and then it's over. It's like having a shot of espresso and you're done. It may be pleasurable, but there's no real connection. And knowing that, and I know we as Americans, we as Western culture people, we love a challenge. I challenge you to do the work, to find somebody to have these connections with, to find somebody to get deep with, because the things that you have been experiencing pale in comparison to what is possible. When you see God at the end of the foot of the bed, when you literally see and feel fireworks, when the last thing you want to do is get out of bed, that's when you know you've arrived. That's when you know you found something. If you're happy with wham bam, thank you ma'am, and you know what, there's nothing wrong with that. Lust is a part of every relationship. There's nothing wrong with it. Sometimes you only have 5 minutes because the kids are napping. That's fine, but that's not your goal.
And it doesn't, and even when you do have a proverbial quickie, it doesn't cause separation, doesn't cause disconnect. It's something that still causes connection. It's something that still brings him closer to you. So here we are explaining men to women a little bit, and how and yeah, afterwards when and women, you all have that intuitive gift. When afterwards, when you experience that, something about him, like he wants to lean in, he wants more, and he wants to connect, he wants to look at you. I mean, that men's eyes are very powerful to us. I mean, that's one of the V's that even I write about, the visualization aspect of it. When he wants to look at you, when he wants to lean in, when he wants to just be with you, that's when you know that for him it's something more than just an act. That's when you know that for him it's something more than just an outlet, a get off kind of thing. That's when you know it's not about him getting off. He wants to stay on.
Yeah, it's more about getting in.
It's more about
it's
getting
more
in.
about getting in and staying in.
Absolutely.
And that's it, because for us and for you as well, it's really about getting deeper within each other. And sex should be the last thing.
Yeah.
That should be the last tool you use. Conversation, physical contact, connection, those are the first things. That's how you get there. And that's how you find out if this is somebody to go there with.
Yeah.
Because you'll know really quickly if you can talk to them. And it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it, because I'm guilty of it, and we're all guilty of it. There's nothing wrong with the random hookup or whatever. But if you're ready, if you're tired of that and you're ready for something real, look for these signs. Look for somebody you can communicate with. Look for somebody who's willing and ready to open up, and that it makes you feel safe to open up. And when you find that, grab onto it and go in that direction and start working together. Because each relationship is about growth. Each relationship is about learning, and that's what we've forgotten. We think that each relationship that we get into is about giving up. Okay, we're married now. I got you. I'm done.
Yeah.
And that's why it's we're frustrated all over the planet. Learn to communicate. Learn to grow within relationship. Learn to come together and know that this is about growth.
Yeah.
It's not about settling. It's not about, okay, I got you now. That's it. It doesn't stop. We had this conversation before we started about life isn't about a destination. It's about awareness and growth. And the destination may feel like awareness, like, oh, I didn't know that before. Now I know. Well, that's your beginning point. That's the end of the beginning. Now I'm aware of this. Let's grow with that. Then that's gonna lead to another awareness. Now let's grow with that. It's a spiral.
Yeah, it's like enlightenment and wisdom. Like the more wise you get, the more you realize how much you don't know. Yeah. And it's the same thing. With I believe anyway, and I'm on that journey, which to me is the destination. But that the more I experience intimacy, the more I realize I don't know what it is yet, and I'm still seeking it. I'm still digging for it. I'm still. It's not that I'm not satisfied or anything like that, but it's that I realize that I'm not there, and I realize that the beauty of it is I'm expecting more. The beauty of it is that It's that turkey in the oven for Thanksgiving. That the longer it's in there, the gooder you know it's going to be when it comes out.
Yeah.
And so, that's part of that. That's part of that journey where, man, there's something extremely powerful to connection and intimacy. I mean, that's why I put those in my personal mission statement. That connection and intimacy is extremely powerful, and especially for a guy that has experienced nothing but artificial intimacy his whole life, for him to experience true connection and true intimacy just trumps and it dwarfs what we know as reality. Your reality is only limited when pornography is just part of your baseline. It's like the brick that holds down your balloon. And when you're able to cut that string and let that balloon go up in the sky, you've seen 1,000,000,000 balloons go up in the air. You've never seen one of them come down out of nowhere. Where do they go? We don't know. They just go and they just do what they do and they just rise. And so when we're able to cut that brick, man, and allow your balloon to float, man, I mean, that's the goodness of life. And that's when you see things different. That's when you don't want to objectify women. That's when you don't want to act out violence towards a woman. That's when you see women in their value and in their worth. You see them in their gift. You're able to see their giftings because you're not looking at the trappings. I mean, you're able to see them, in ways that you were never able to see them before. It's almost like seeing ultraviolet light all of a sudden. It's like, wow.
It's like the Course in Miracles says, if we could actually see each other how we really are, we would fall on our knees in exaltation.
Yeah.
We don't see each other, and we can't see each other until we learn to communicate, learn to come together. And it starts with talking. It starts with connection. It starts with acknowledging where we are and moving forward. And so I want to thank all you guys for tuning in, everybody who showed up here tonight. This has been a lot of fun for me, and I hope it's been, for you, Kirk. And if you want to get in touch with one of us, you can tag, leave a message on here, or you can find me at jasonbkendrick.com.
And ironically, I am kirkmsamuels.com. And yeah, pretty easy to find. Can I get my phone number?
Yeah.
I get my phone number, man. You can holler at your boy.
Yeah.
720-515-6536. Rewind it back if you didn't catch that. But kirkmsamuels.com, absolutely. And we are here. Somebody put a big old...
Dina, thank you, Dina.
Man, Dina's been on it. You go, girl. High five to you. Give me a hand on the screen, girl. Boom. Dina's on it, man. Golly.
Thank you for being here, Dina. And thank you all for showing up. This is, it's our passion, it's our purpose, and without you guys, we would just be talking to each other, which is fun, but it doesn't spread the word. So please get in touch with us. And if you need to get in touch with me, if you need to get in touch with me quickly, I'm gonna follow my man's example. I'll give you my phone number: 970-333-4616. Text me, call me,
man,
leave me a
message. You got one of them government phone numbers, man. I mean, you got like one of them taxi cab phone numbers, man. Where you get that bad boy
It's
from?
easy to remember.
And you can share this video, by the way. I mean, you can just hit share, man. Share it on your page, share it on your timeline. Share it in a message to somebody, a direct message. Slide it into somebody's DMs. There's somebody that would resonate with it. But share the message, man. Keep it spinning here.
When you were watching this, you were like, so and so needs to see this, or so and so needs to hear this, or I need to talk to so and so about this. Share it with them. Keep this going. Keep this conversation going. And I don't care if you don't come back to us. Keep the conversation going. Keep talking. Keep growing. That's how we're going to change this world. So thank you very much for showing up. Thank you, Kirk, for being here.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate you, sir.
My man. You the real deal, man. You the real MVP.
I can't do it without him.
You the real MVP, man.
All right. Thank you, guys, and I hope to see you all soon. Peace.
Boom.
We didn't need audience.
No, we sure didn't. that was straight. Man, that was 2 hours.
I think we started 10 minutes late, so it's not quite.
Okay,
still.
so